There are two other things that I do every day that I hope maybe listeners might find useful. But when I wake up in the morning, if I close my eyes and I bring my chin to my top of my chest and I get quiet and I ask myself, how can I love you more? And I listen for whatever answer comes through. And the answer can come through as an image, as a sensation, as a word or a sentence. What I'm doing is checking in with myself every day.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the Good Space Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Emily vanSonnenberg. She is a really awesome person. Okay, so we're going to talk about true happiness, the science of true happiness. It's something that everyone wants. It's something that people want to attain. And she is someone who definitely has a really good grasp and pulse on this. So she's a university psychology course creator and lecturer, psychological and behavioral healer, and creativity consultant, which you know we love on the Good Space. Creativity just opens the door for all kinds of connection and healing and all the good stuff. In 2009, she created and began teaching UCLA's first positive psychology course entitled Happiness, and she currently teaches the course to students and the general population for UCLA Extension. In her private practice as a healer and intuitive, Emily specializes in helping highly sensitive, empathic, and creative people. Her approach integrates scientific research with an acknowledgement of the benefits of embracing the human capacity for intuition as a source of invaluable information that can guide decision-making, actions, and elevate consciousness for self-actualization. Again, something we love to talk about at the Good Space, intuition, self-actualization. It's very in line with what we are trying to learn here. This championing of the whole self has seen Emily practice yoga for over 20 years, attaining 2 yoga certifications and teaching since 2005. Emily loves helping people to recognize their true nature, free themselves, and activate their potential to create a meaningful, fun, and rich life. Emily, welcome to the Good Space Podcast.
Thanks, Francesca. Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Yes, we're excited to have you. And I know we briefly spoke before starting this interview, but I know we kind of have similar alignments in our life. Like you said, you had a baby in the last year and you moved from Munich to Australia, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm in Zurich right now. I'm going to have my first baby. And then everything you're doing is just so in line with what we teach here. So I'm really excited to learn from you today.
Oh, cool. I'll probably be learning from you. But
hey, okay, perfect. That sounds good. And it's exciting because I also studied psychology in college. I didn't go as far as you did, but I got my bachelor's in psychology. So I think this will be a really interesting conversation. So what drew you to the work that you're doing? Because I'm sure it started with a seed, right? And then it probably grew to the combination of things that you're doing. So what brought you to focus on happiness specifically in positive psychology?
Yeah, great question. Look, I think at the most every action a human takes is in an effort to be happy. Even if that action is inaction, it's in an effort to be happy, right? So if we're going to go with that premise, you're right. There was a seed, and I think that is the seed that exists in all of us. So I think I was looking for my own happiness. Out of high school, I went to college in Boston, and I went there to be a baseball commentator for the radio because I love baseball and sports, and I love listening to sports on the radio specifically. Well, I like going in real life too, but And so in terms of being a baseball commentator, during my second year, I was sitting in my dorm room thinking to myself, envisioning my future. And perhaps I was pessimistic, but, I went with what I was truly feeling. And I felt as though I said to myself, in the future, when you're 40 and you're commentating, and let's say that you get assigned to go be a commentator for the Brewers in Milwaukee, Now, at the time in the late 90s, the Brewers were a terrible team. And so I thought to myself, if I have to sit and talk about the Brewers, they're the most boring team in baseball right now. That's going to be really difficult for me if I'm bored. I knew myself, and I knew myself that I couldn't get bored. I would not be happy if I was bored. And I definitely didn't want to be learning from books at that time. So after a lot of thought, I decided to leave school, and I did. And I pursued a number of different things that I was interested in. And I was searching. I was really searching for what is going to be fulfilling for me. What's going to make me happy? What makes me excited? And I just tried a number of different things that I felt honestly pulled to. And I learned a lot. And then in 2005, I got in a really bad car accident. And bad, I don't know if I should say bad, but bad in the sense that, some people were hurt, myself included. And I was incapacitated and couldn't walk for a number of months. And during that time, I asked myself 5 questions. And those 5 questions helped me to arrive at an action and to identify what it was I wanted to pursue. So that car accident was so life-changing that I couldn't help but ask these questions, I guess. And the questions were, what are you good at? What are you naturally good at? What are you naturally bad at? What do you love doing? What do you hate doing? And then what experience left you feeling completely fulfilled? And so I answered all those questions, and it was very clear to me that I needed to go to school to be a psychologist or healer, whatever you want to call it. And because I was clear that what left me feeling completely fulfilled was being a good friend and helping someone to see something that they don't see in themselves. And therefore, if I can point that out and then they can go with it and run with it. And maybe it gives them hope. Maybe it gives them motivation, inspiration, whatever, just a new perspective. So after that, I worked my butt off and went back to school. And then while I was in school, I got assigned for psychology. I got assigned from my cognitive psych teacher an assignment. And the assignment was, this is funny, I think, because I was so stumped. She said, I want you to you got to write a research paper, and the research paper it needs to be on something you can improve. And I thought to myself, all right, let me think. What the heck would I want to improve? Do I want to improve my memory? No, I want to forget some things. You know what I mean? I'm just playing here. But, I really thought, what would I want to improve, psychologically in the human, regarding the human condition? And I was like, I want to improve my happiness. Could I be happier? And so I just looked up, honestly, I put in Google, science, psychology, happiness. And it was only a few years after Marty Seligman, who's the founder of positive psychology, had invented the field. And I bought his book called Authentic Happiness. And I read the first paragraph. And right away I was like, oh, the science that speaks, it's putting a language to my heart. And that was the beginning.
Wow, that's amazing. And I do want to point out that throughout that story, you were curious. Like, it wasn't like you were trying to force it or be like, oh, I have to do this. I have to do that. It's like, let me ask myself these 5 questions. Okay, great. That's my next step. And then let me ask myself this other question. That's my next step. And I love that you just kind of let it organically grow. And I know that's a big thing that I try to talk about and also practice in my own life, although not perfectly, obviously, but just being curious and not putting so much pressure on always having the answers. And I love that you let it happen organically. And, obviously, we would love for it to ask ourselves those questions without experiencing a major accident. But I think those kinds of experiences, it probably helped you just go faster to that point, right? Than some other people might have.
Absolutely. There was a blessing in it as well, for sure. And you're right, Francesca. And thanks for pointing that out too, that I went in curious, asking questions. Because I think that when you do that, like you said, you take pressure off. I think if we can take pressure off ourselves, if we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, that is, that can only help us be more creative, feel more positive emotions, and really, really align with our truth.
Absolutely. And I want to talk more about the course that you created for UCLA, but going off of what you had already shared, I know that you place a specific emphasis on true happiness instead of simply happiness. So what's the difference between happiness and then true happiness?
Yeah, good question. Well, look, I think that whatever it is that makes an individual truly happy is going to be different, right? Because we're all different humans and whatnot. So I don't want to speak for other people. But the difference between happiness, the way science measures it, and I would say true happiness is, all right, so if you wake up today and you feel good, that rating that you're giving to how you're feeling in any given moment is always relative to what you previously were feeling. Happiness is fleeting, according to the science. Therefore, it's a waste of time to chase, in my opinion. There are other ways to feel happiness, which is basically a high in the brain and in the body. And there are other ways to go about that are super productive, like, exercise is going to do the same thing in a way. So if you're chasing the fleeting, you're going to be chasing your whole life. And that's not the way to go, I don't think. I think pursuit of what you love, pursuit of what's meaningful, pursuit of what you enjoy and what captivates you and what you're curious about, that's different. Now, for true happiness is, I think, that which doesn't change, your true essence. So, for example, if you go into meditation and you ask nothing of yourself, right? Don't ask yourself to feel a certain way. Don't ask yourself, you don't even need to sit for 20 minutes. As long as you get a minute or 2 seconds of feeling your true essence, you've achieved, you've done the work. Just sitting down is doing the work too. But so in a nutshell, happiness is fleeting. It changes. True happiness doesn't change.
I love that. It reminds me of Eckhart Tolle's thought of like presence and how, the pain body and how, and I'm sure this is also from other teachers. Like I've just read so many books, but like the idea that like, at least this is what I'm learning right now, is that expectation causes pain. And it's almost like the more, which I like, unfortunately have been learning a lot this last week, because I was reading a Wayne Dyer book and I'm like, oh, I want to learn to surrender more. I want to learn to like let go more. And I'm like, don't wish that ever again, because then opportunities come for you to practice it. And sometimes, and most of the time it doesn't feel good. But I was just thinking from what you said, like connecting with your divine essence, it's like, it's presence, right? It's not having that expectation. It's allowing things to be as they are. And it's the way you travel, not where you're traveling to. Right. So I just love that you pointed that out, especially having the science background, like it confirms to you the truth of that. And I love that.
I was just going to add something really quickly, so the science of happiness, the information that's come through the research is invaluable. Honestly, we can't put a price on how much it has helped human beings and will forever help actually human beings. It gives tools, resources, XYZ. That said, one of the issues with it is that it can often be really culturally specific or time specific. So for example, it's like, I often think to myself, okay, if I were born a male in India in 1960, what would the cultural teachings have been around? What would the cultural expectations have been? What kind of pressures would I have felt? How would I have responded to those? And that, if you take somebody out of their culture and out of their geography, I think it can be really helpful for helping them to imagine and find that true essence.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because it makes me wonder well, first of all, is it bad that our environment and culture and how we were brought up maybe influences that happiness? Or do you recommend a certain way for someone listening or for me to strip away those influences and actually understand what truly makes me happy? Because there is pressure, even just with like family or friends or like the people you keep company with, like that can influence your sense of happiness. But like, how do I actually know that this truly makes me happy outside of all of these like contexts and like influences?
Right. Yeah. How do you strip it away? I think that's such a good question. I think one of the first things a person can do is just to notice it, just to acknowledge your culture and start within your family. Yeah, that's perfect. Because every family has a culture. Every family has a way of operating. They have their dynamics and whatnot, what their expectations, their pressures. So if you can see that it's just one way and it doesn't make it right or wrong, the United States is just, the culture in Southern California is different than the culture that you're going to find in the Northeast. And it's different to what you're going to experience in Zurich, and it's different to what you're going to experience in Munich, anywhere in the world. So no culture is right or wrong, in my opinion. They're just different. And I think if you can notice what is coming from outside of the self versus like what thoughts are coming from outside of the self versus what thoughts or feelings come from within the self, that can be really helpful. So just being mindful of that.
That's great. Love that. Just awareness. Like the more we can be aware, the more we can make those decisions or understand the self better. And that's really powerful. Okay. So we'd love to learn more about happiness, the course that you introduced at UCLA for undergrads, and now you offer it at UCLA Extension for the general public. So tell me how this happened. Like what inspired you to create the course? What do you expect students to like take away by the end of it? Just tell me all the things.
So when I was in my last year as an undergrad psychology student at UCLA, I found out that, so I was heavily into studying my positive psychology at that point. And I was just, like I said, reading Marty Seligman's book made me hungry. And I followed that hunger, right? And I went down to UCSD and took a course in the summertime by a phenomenal professor. And that course blew my mind. Let me take a step back. I found out at UCLA that there was a program, and it started at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, whereby if a student wanted to teach a subject or a course that was not offered in the current curriculum, that they could put together a proposal to the executive academic committee. They could get a mentor at blah, blah, blah. I thought, well, positive psych isn't being taught at the #1 psych school in the country. What the heck? This doesn't make any freaking sense. What? So I was like, I'm just going to try to teach this. Interestingly, there was another person proposing that at the same time. So it was cool because it was really, positive psych was really coming alive as an academic science at that point. So anyway, I put together this proposal and got my mentor. So like I could ask him questions and whatnot. And I put the syllabus together and put all the readings and activities together that I would do, took it, submitted it. It got approved. So I was so freaking excited. I got to facilitate that course in 2009. It really taught me that I love teaching. I didn't know that I liked that kind of teaching, meaning like, academic teaching. I didn't know that I really enjoyed it until I had that experience. And then, so after I graduated, I then went to grad school for positive psychology. And then when I got done with grad school, I was like, I want to be teaching. That's one of the things I want to be doing because I loved it so much. I proposed the course at UCLA Extension, and it was accepted. It's an 11-week course. I really make the course a lot about learning about the self in the context of positive psychology research and activities. And I set it up that way is because I think it's pretty challenging to make yourself fulfilled unless you know yourself really well. Like, you know yourself like the back of your hand. I know how I'm going to respond in A to Z situations. I know my preferences. I know my likes, my dislikes. I'm not afraid of my shadow self. I'll go anywhere within my psyche, which I think you got to do if you're going to truly fulfill yourself, and don't be afraid of the dark, because part of the dark is, that's where some of the fun is too. Once once you stop judging it and let it be free. So my goal for people, honestly, is I want to help them to think critically and find in the course whatever it is that sticks for them at that moment in time, because everyone comes in a different space. And I can't know what every person needs in that moment, but I just try to create a safe space for people to explore themselves and to discuss the exploration with others. Yeah.
I love that. And that's really a big part of our mission as well, is to create that safe space for people to connect within, to heal, to explore different sides of themselves, because it's scary to go in those dark places. But I love that you said it's fun, because you're right. Like, once you see, like, it amazes me always that I can learn something completely new about myself, even though I've learned so much already. And it's like, whoa, like, I didn't expect that, but now I can take action and I can move forward on it. And that part to me is exciting, at least.
Yeah, totally. It's so exciting to learn that new stuff and what you can do with it.
Yeah, it's great. And so how has your work on the science of happiness transformed your perspective on yourself, your relationships, your lifestyle? Like, talk to me about how that's changed your world.
I find it hard to answer that question because I think it's hard to isolate all the variables. However, what the main thing that I would say is, I think I've really learned that it's more about the science of fulfillment. What makes life rich? What makes life meaningful? What makes life inspired? And I think that I really try to step into my life and walk the talk and live according to my values with integrity. But I don't know that I learned that from the science. So I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm not answering the question. It's very well.
No, you answered it perfectly. And I think you hit on a key thing is your values. And I think a lot in life comes down to that, right? Like, what do you value the most? And if you know those values, it becomes even easier to make sure everything aligns with it. And, even if the science doesn't more or less like support it, at least you can teach the concepts or the ideas to other people. And I think that's amazing. That's incredible. And going back to what you said about how people show up in different parts of their life when they take this course, which, yeah, that makes complete sense. Like, everyone's on a different part of the spectrum of like fulfillment. If anything, if you're like, no matter where you are in your journey, what do you hope that people, like, what's the one or two things that you hope they learn or take away or start to practice after?
I would really want people to learn that your perception really shapes the reality you think you live in. And I say you think you live in because, if you're happy one day, or you like so-and-so one day and the next day you don't like them, like, you're just changing your realities, based on your mood or your emotions. And so again, right there is a moment of not going after happiness when that shouldn't be the case. I think that I would want people to know that your perception creates your reality. And also that, I don't know if listeners are familiar with this happiness pie chart, but this is a really cool finding from positive psychology. The finding was done by a researcher at UC Riverside, and it found that when it comes to differences in people's happiness, the three contributors are 50% of your happiness variance is due to genetics. 10% is due to circumstance. 10%. So everybody stop saying that money is going to make you happy. 40, right? And 40% is due to intentional behavior. And the exciting part about that is like because of neuroplasticity, meaning where the brain can become rewired through various activities such as meditation, mindfulness. Your parents condition you to think a certain way, society conditions you to think a certain way. Go to another society or culture for a month or a year or whatever and see how your mind changes. You'll see some neuroplasticity changing or you'll experience it. But I think that that's important to know just how much of a role our actions and our mind, how our perceptions play in things. And the other thing I would say is if you ever see a finding in the research that says, people who practice gratitude are, 90% more likely to be happy as compared to people who don't practice gratitude. Make the findings fit your life. When you're going to apply them into something practical, I would just really hone in on make it fit you, make it fit your personality, your values, your lifestyle. That's the way it's going to be sustainable. You'll be able to continue pursuing it and that it'll fit you. Always tailor it to fit yourself.
Yeah, because I feel like so many people feel pressure to like fit a certain timeline or certain like path. And I love that. Yes, it's very flexible, very moldable to like you, because the greatest chance of success is if you do it the way that fits best for you. So I love that you brought that up. So thank you. And I know as well, obviously, that you practice yoga. You've mentioned meditation. You're a healer and intuitive. So do you have a morning routine or an evening routine? Like, what are the practices that you do daily to keep yourself in that space for yourself?
Yes, I do meditate. I meditate at least twice daily. Like I said, sometimes it can be, like I said earlier, sometimes you can, sit for an hour and sometimes you can sit for 2 minutes. But as long as you get that sense of your essence, then you've got it. You know what I mean? But also just sitting down to do the practice I meditate twice a day at least. I make sure every night I spend time in nature. So every night I go outside, I sit, I look up at the sky. I've always liked looking at the sky since I was a little girl. I try to do the things I liked as a little girl because, before you get all effed up. So, and I really just try to be at one with nature, with myself, with the physical world, the energetic world, whatever that might be. There are two other things that I do every day that I hope maybe listeners might find useful. But when I wake up in the morning, I also ask myself, I close my eyes and I bring my, chin to my top of my chest, and I get quiet and I ask myself, how can I love you more? And I listen for whatever answer comes through. And the answer can come through, as an image, as a sensation, as a word or a sentence. But what I'm doing is checking in with myself every day to see what is it that I need and what is it that I need to give myself to be more of what I think all of our true essences are, which is love. That's the other thing I do. And if I ever feel any kind of frustration or irritation or anger or something like that, I do the same practice, but instead of asking, how can I love you more? I ask, what do you need? And then I give it to myself. So, punchline being, if you're going to try that practice, always follow whatever you're told. Don't judge it. Just give yourself exactly what you're told.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful. And I think I definitely felt that, and I'm going to start doing that more. So hopefully whoever's listening resonates with that as well. That's very powerful. Okay. So what book are you currently reading or is at the top of your to read list?
I am currently reading a couple things. It's hard for me to read one thing at a time. But I'm reading, there's an article in the New Yorker that I'm really enjoying. It's quite long, called What is Energy and How to Get More of It or something. So I'm reading about that. And I really like New Yorker articles a lot because they usually have multiple perspectives coming from these journalists. I find that really helpful and a great way to click out of one's culture or conditioning and expand the mind, expand consciousness. And then I'm also reading this really cool, fun book called Daily Rituals by Mason Curry. And I'm reading it. It's so fun. It basically looks at different artists and scientists and looks at what do they do every day. How, and some of the behaviors are so fun and wild to play around with.
I actually have Daily Rituals Women at Work. So do you have yes. So are you reading the first one? Just the Daily, okay. Maybe I should get that one as well. But I found here in Zurich, the Women at Work one. And you're right. Like, it's really cool to see how different creatives do their work and what works for them. And yeah, it's very fascinating. It definitely touches on that intuitive, creative spirit.
Totally. And so much, it's just so much greatness comes out of that place of the creative, that creative, intuitive spirit that we all have.
Absolutely. No, exactly. Because I feel like that's when you're most at ease and connected. And like you said, you're touching that divine essence. So things can manifest faster, or you can do things more effortlessly in that energy. And so I love that you are reading that book. I'm going to have to make sure I get that one.
Awesome. I'm going to have to make sure I get the other one.
Yes, exactly. That would be great. If our listeners are interested in learning more about your work or joining your happiness course, where and how can they find you?
You can go to my website, which is emilyvanSonnenberg.com. And you can email me at ebs@emilyb.org. That's probably the most direct way.
Perfect. And we'll make sure all of that is linked in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want to go right away to connect, you can just click over there and you'll find her. Also curious, I know you have the course. What other things are you working on? What's your next step or vision or creative project?
Okay, well, I have a project that I'm working on. It's very fun and exciting. I wish I could share details, but I'm legally not allowed. It's a nice amalgamation, actually, of kind of what we've been doing on this podcast interview, which is bringing together science with less science, where the research is a little farther along and a little less far along, not so far along, in a way to make self-development fun for people. So I'm working on a fun thing with that.
Oh, so exciting. Well, great. I'm excited to see what happens and when you can announce it.
I will let you know for sure.
Yes, please do. And we'll share it with our audience too when that happens. So that would be fun.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, Emily, thank you so much for having this conversation and sharing your knowledge with us. And is there one last thing you want to say before we sign off?
Oh, thank you for having me, Francesca. It was super fun. I loved your questions. And I think the last thing I'd say to people is just be nice to yourself. Be gentle with yourself.
It's good. It's great advice. I love that. All righty. Well, we'll chat soon. Thank you. Now it's time for an affirmation. I am happiness. Happiness is my favorite way to travel through life. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719 0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.